This is absolutely repulsive. This really is something else. And it really just summarizes how the whole world has been turned on its head by those who are the architects of the genocide of the Palestinian people. Now, Zippy Hotovely is the Israeli ambassador to the UK, a fanatical defender, of course, of Israel's genocidal onslaught and also general subjugation of the Palestinian people. Yesterday, she posted a tweet in which she stood alongside Lisa Nandy, the Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport. Let me just read it out. Thank you, Secretary of State Lisa Nandy, for a constructive and thoughtful meeting at DCMS, that's the Department for Culture, Media and Sport. I appreciate your recognition and understanding of our serious concerns about the failings of the BBC and Glastonbury in staging and broadcasting blatant anti-Jewish hatred. A clear line was crossed from free speech into the incitement of hatred, violence and murder. I'm grateful that we stand united against all forms of anti-Semitism, including when it's amplified on public platforms. This regards a chant at Glastonbury Music Festival, specifically Death to the IDF, by a punk band. The IDF is a genocidal killing machine whose atrocities have led the International Criminal Court to issue arrest warrants against Benjamin Netanyahu and his former defence minister for war crimes and crimes against humanity, and indeed has led a consensus of genocide scholars, including those in Israel itself, to conclude that Israel is committing genocide against the Palestinian people. There was a profound irony, of course, which is Zippy Hotovely supports sending IDF soldiers to their deaths, given she supports a genocidal onslaught which has principally exterminated Palestinian civilians, but also killed hundreds of IDF soldiers. She claims that this is anti-Semitism and whipping up this storm against Jewish people. This is a deranged lie. It's simply false. The IDF, a genocidal killing machine, and Jewish people as a whole are not the same thing. And it's actually anti-Semitic to conflate the two. This is absolutely something else. But honestly, this isn't what I'm actually talking about. You'd expect Zippy Hotovely to behave like this. That's not the point here. Let's just go into the world on its head. Lisa Nandy has whipped up, or helped, so it wasn't just her, to be fair, was it? She has fueled a furore over the Death to the IDF chant, labelling it anti-Semitism, a grotesque abuse of the meaning of anti-Semitism. Anger at a genocidal foreign army is driven by its genocidal behaviour, which includes deliberately massacring unarmed, starved Palestinian civilians, as IDF soldiers and officers have confessed they have been ordered to do. It is not driven by hatred of Jewish people. I'll talk more about Lisa Nandy's behaviour here. History is going to be so damning, Lisa. But let's just zone in on what the Israeli ambassador wrote. Discussing Lisa Nandy, who she posed for picture with, she said a clear line was crossed from free speech into the incitement of hatred, violence and murder. I'm grateful that we stand united against all forms of anti-Semitism, including when it's amplified on public platforms. So Lisa Nandy here, standing united with the Israeli ambassador to confront what is wrongly described as racism and what the ambassador labels incitement of hatred, violence and murder on a public platform. Let's listen to Zippy Hotovely on a public platform on LBC, January 2024.
Those areas must be destroyed. And one of the things we exposed to the world after getting into the areas in Gaza that we try to find all those tunnels and the underground metro city that Hamas has built, thanks to this great support of Iran, Qatar, the international community generosity, everything turned to be this horrible terror city. One of the things we realized that every school, every mosque, every second house has an access to tunnel. So this is, and of course, ammunition.
But that's an argument for destroying the whole of Gaza, every single building in it.
So do you have another solution how to destroy the underground tunnel city, that this is the place where the terrorists hide, where they have all their ammunition, and this is the rockets that are still fired on Israeli.
So there is the Israeli ambassador publicly calling for the destruction of every building in Gaza. And bear in mind that an Israeli official declared on the 12th of October 2023 that Gaza will be reduced to a city of tents, with no buildings left standing, which is exactly what Israel went and did to Gaza. Almost all homes in Gaza are destroyed or damaged. Israel has systematically attacked and destroyed hospitals, schools, mosques, churches, libraries, universities, cafes, any and all pillars of a functioning society. Now, what this Israeli senior diplomat was doing was not an abstraction, because no one thinks a punk band at Glastonbury Music Festival is actually going to achieve death to the IDF. She's part of Israel's actually existing genocidal machine. She used her position to justify the mass indiscriminate destruction of civilian infrastructure, which can only lead to mass civilian deaths. Because if you're destroying all the buildings in Gaza, then you're going to kill, as Israel has, vast numbers of civilians. A key definition of genocide, as per the Genocide Convention, is deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. Obviously, if you systematically destroy all civilian infrastructure in a territory, then you are deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. No people can survive if you destroy all of the infrastructure that makes civilization possible. Equally, the Genocide Convention criminalizes the direct and public incitement to commit genocide. Calling for the total destruction of an entire territory, which is what Hotovely did, is the direct and public incitement to commit genocide. In a rational world, Hotovely, given she has diplomatic protection from legal prosecution in the UK, would have been expelled from our country for what she said. Did that happen? No, that did not happen. Quite the opposite. Instead, she's treated by the British government as someone with moral authority on the subject of inciting hatred and violence. Indeed, more than that, someone whose demand should be acted on in terms of imposing punishments on the public broadcaster, or what is, as I think we can all see, a state broadcaster, because the punk band initiated this chant when Glastonbury Music Festival happened to be broadcast by the BBC. This is insane. It's utterly insane. You'd be forgiven for concluding these people are trying to make you all go insane by turning the world on its head so wantonly and brazenly. Now, before Glastonbury, Lisa Nandy said it's not my place to tell the BBC what they can and can't broadcast. That would take us to a very dark place. Seems as though we are in that very dark place. She did an emergency statement to the House of Commons about the chant. So we had an emergency ministerial statement, not about, for example, again, the IDF deliberately massacring hundreds of deliberately starved, unarmed Palestinian civilians at aid points, but about a chant expressing people's anger and disgust with that IDF. She starts this non-stop furore over the chant being broadcast, indeed expands the furore to include the cancellation of the documentary about the plight of Palestinian children who have been killed in tens of thousands of numbers in Gaza because the child narrator turned out to be the son of a junior technocratic minister in the Hamas administration, which was irrelevant because the child narrator didn't write any of his words. They were written for him by the documentary because he was the narrator. She said, I've been very clear that people must be held accountable for the decisions that were taken. I have asked the question to the board of the BBC, why has nobody been fired? What I want is an explanation as to why not. If it is a tackleable offence, then obviously that should happen. Sorry, I should not let my anger get the better of me here. But if the BBC, which is independent, considers that it is not, I think what all parliamentarians want to know is why. Interesting what she talks about there, isn't it? What Lisa Nandy says about accountability for the decisions that were taken. I agree with Lisa that people should be held accountable for the decisions that were taken. Decisions, for example, like arming a genocide, arming the genocidal extermination of a people, which I think is rather more important than a documentary, which was a rare example of the BBC showing the plight of murdered children being systematically murdered by our weapons, having a furore about it because of the child narrator. You are so morally bankrupt. How do you live with yourself? Do you have a conscience? Do you have any moral code? I'm interested, actually. What goes on in these people's heads? How do they justify their actions to themselves? Bear in mind, too, that if the documentary commissioned by the BBC into the systematic destruction... Oh, God. Bear in mind, too, that a documentary commissioned by the BBC into the systematic destruction of Gaza's healthcare system was also cancelled, despite having no problems with it whatsoever. But the government's beef is, of course, not with that, not with the failure to properly cover the depravity being unleashed by the IDF, quite the opposite, which is hardly surprising because this implicates the British government, which is arming and facilitating this crime of historic proportions. In terms of genocidal rhetoric more broadly, the genocidal rhetoric of Israeli ministers and officials literally fills hundreds of pages, from the very beginning to more recently, for example, the Israeli minister Bezalel Smotrich declaring that Gaza will be entirely destroyed, or indeed Israel officially declaring it will drive Gaza's population into a concentration camp and deport them, with Netanyahu's stating, we are demolishing more and more of their homes. They have nowhere to return to. The only obvious result will be the desire of the Gazans to emigrate outside the Strip. Our main problem is the receiving countries. You see, the genocidal words, which are actually anti-Palestinian hatred, they're not talking about Hamas there. They're talking about the civilian population. That rhetoric is underpinned with firepower and consequences. Firepower partly delivered by His Majesty's government. Insane, isn't it? It's insane. You don't need to wait for history to work out this one. This is actually completely insane. In terms of Lisa Nandy and her role more broadly, in opposition, she was the Shadow International Development Secretary. In January 2024, the same month that Zippy Hotovely legitimised wiping Gaza from the face of the earth, the Israeli state initiated a smear campaign against UNRWA, which is Gaza's main humanitarian agency, the Palestinian Refugee Agency, with baseless claims of terrorism. This happened to coincide with South Africa's genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice, with a damning ruling and provisional orders issued against Israel. This led to multiple countries suspending funding for UNRWA when Gaza was in a catastrophic humanitarian situation. Clearly, this had dire consequences, undoubtedly condemning many Palestinians to death. One of the countries that suspended aid was Britain. Now, this was the moment for Labour to condemn this genocidal move. With the power Labour had at the time, when it was massively ahead in the polls, by the way, and the Tory government was falling apart, which was about crippling the main humanitarian agency in Gaza during a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, which was entirely human-made. But Labour didn't do that. Exactly the opposite. Lisa Nandy instead declared allegations this serious demand a serious response. As the UK rightly ensures that aid is never used to support terrorism, we are seeking urgent discussions with ministers to ensure ordinary Gazans can access aid. So what Lisa Nandy did is offer cover to the British government as it helped facilitate genocide. As I and others predicted, the smears against UNRWA would prove to be completely baseless. It was obvious from the beginning, and the funding was eventually restored, but not before huge damage was done. Lisa Nandy is someone I used to get on with, by the way. She's someone who used to present herself as progressive. She still presents herself as a great champion of Palestinian rights. She's a political fraud. Someone who has, based on the information that I've given you, no discernible moral compass. And just one of many government ministers who will be damned by history and held to account for what they have done to the Palestinian people. Please like and subscribe. Please offer your thoughts and your comments. Help us take on the pro-genocide media at patreon.com/unjust84. We're expanding our operations all because of you, reaching millions of people, approaching 50 million, for example, views in the last few weeks on Instagram alone, but on all the different platforms, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Blue Sky, Threads, and so on. Anyway, you're all making that possible. Share the video. I'll speak to you soon.